of the Senate in the second regular session of the 17th Congress is hereby called to order. Senator Antonio Sani Trillanes IV will lead the chamber in prayer.
In the name of the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit, Amen. Almighty God, we come to you in praise today and give thanks for the blessings you continue to shower upon us. Lord, we ask for your forgiveness for all our shortcomings and weakness of heart, and pray that you bestow upon us your wisdom and fortitude, that we may overcome the difficulties that lie ahead. As we stand before you, we ask that you lead us in your ways and fill our hearts with light and love today and every day. You guide us, please guide us in our proceedings, that we may do what is right and just according to your will. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. The Lyceum of the Philippines University Harmonic Chorale will lead us in singing the Philippine National Anthem, and then they will also render a song entitled Piliin Mo ang Pilipinas. Thank you to the Lyceum of the Philippines University Harmonic Chorale. Secretary, please call the roll.
The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Hunasan, Monteveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Soberi, Senate President permit.
With 19 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 60th session, Wednesday, February 21, and consider the same as approved.
Any objection to dispensing with the reading of the journal and considering the said journal as approved? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, we'd like to welcome some guests in the gallery. We have the political science students from the St. Scholastica's College, Manila, headed by Professor Faye Rafael, and also the Public Policy and Administration for Development students from UP Los Baños College of Public Affairs, and headed by Professor Eileen Lapitan. Also, we have the FAO representative, Mr. Jose Luis Fernandez, Ms. Tamara Palis Duran, and Claudius Cesar Gabinete of the DRR CC specialist, Mr. President. Also, the guests of the Foreign Relations Committee of Senator Legarda. We have the Department of Trade, Secretary Lopez, Ramon Lopez, Department of Foreign Affairs, led by Ambassador Gilberto Asuque and Undersecretary Tihanki, the Department of Finance, led by Director Runas, the NEDA, led by ASEC Sombilia, the Tariff Commission, led by Commissioner Albano, and then representatives from the DOJ, DOE, DENR, BOI, PRC, IPO Philippines, GPBB, DOE, Marina, PCG, BIFAR, and the PCAF. Mr. President, would like to welcome them to the Senate.
Welcome to all of our guests.
Mr. President, before we proceed with the reference of business to avail of the presence of our colleagues, I move to consider for third reading Senate Joint Resolution Number 6 under Committee Report 27.
Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
May we request the Secretary to read the title of the measure?
Secretary, please do so.
Joint resolution declaring January 17 of every year as James Leonard Tagle Gordon Day, a special non-working holiday in the city of Olongapo and the Subic Bay Freeport Zone in recognition of the achievements, contributions, and heroism of James Leonard Tagle Gordon.
Mr. President, printed copies of the measure were distributed last February 21, 2018, thereby complying with the 3-day rule. I therefore move to vote on third and final reading, Senate Joint Resolution Number 6, through a roll call vote.
Are we ready, colleagues, to vote on third reading for this measure?
After they adjourn their meetings, Mr. President,
Yes,
perhaps
are we ready? This is third reading. Okay, so any objection to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved. And the Secretary will now conduct the roll call vote.
The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Honasan, Hontiveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Subiri, Senate President Pimentel.
With 18 affirmative votes, 0 negative votes, Senate Joint Resolution number 6 is approved on third reading.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Bills on first reading. 1703, an act recognizing Faith Academy, incorporated as an educational institution of international character, granting certain prerogatives conducive to its growth as such, and for other purposes. Senator Lacson.
Referred to the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture.
1704, an act establishing the Philippine Geriatric Center Research and Training Institute, defining its objectives, powers, and functions, appropriating funds thereof, and for other purposes. Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committees on Government, Corporations and Public Enterprises, Health and Demography, Ways and Means, and Finance.
Resolutions. Resolution number 643, resolution directing the Senate Committee on Health to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the country's immunization program vis-a-vis the reported measles outbreak in Davao City and Zamboanga City. Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committee on Health and Demography.
644, resolution directing the Committee on Public Services to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation anent new cases of alleged pilferage, bukas bagahe inside the airport with the end goals of addressing luggage pilferage and ensuring the highest safety and security of passengers in Philippine airports. Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committee on Public Services.
645, resolution expressing the sense of the Senate to call for Senator Laila de Lima's release from detention. Senators Pangilinan, Drilon, Trillanes IV, Aquino, Trillanes IV, Aquino IV, and Hontiveros.
To the Committee on Rules.
646, resolution directing the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources and other appropriate committees of the Senate to inquire and review in aid of legislation the procedures for the approval and monitoring of environmentally critical projects. Senator Joel Villanueva.
To the Committees on Environment and Natural Resources and Local Government.
Committee reports. Committee report number 243, prepared and submitted by the Committee on Foreign Relations on proposed Senate Resolution number 647, entitled Resolution Concurring in the Ratification of the Free Trade Agreement between the EFTA and the Philippines, recommending its approval without amendment. Senator Ligarda.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
244, prepared and submitted by the Committee on Foreign Relations on proposed Senate Resolution number 648, entitled Resolution Concurring in the accession to the International Convention on the Control of Harmful Anti-Fouling Systems on Ships 2001, recommending its approval without amendment. Senator Ligarda. Committee report number 245.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 245, prepared and submitted by the Committee on Foreign Relations on PA's Resolution number 649, resolution concurring in the accession to the Protocol of 1997 to amend the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships 1973 as modified by the Protocol of 1978 relating thereto, recommending its approval without amendment, Senator Ligarda.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
246, prepared and submitted by the Committee on Foreign Relations on PA's Resolution number 650, resolution concurring in the accession to the Protocol of 1988 relating to the International Convention of Load Lines, 1966, recommending its approval without amendment, Senator Ligarda.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
247, prepared and submitted by the Committee on Foreign Relations on PA's Resolution number 651, entitled Resolution Concurring in the Accession to the Protocol of 1978 relating to the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, 1974, recommending its approval without amendment, Senator Ligarda.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
248, prepared and submitted by the Committee on Foreign Relations on PA's Resolution number 652, resolution concurring in the accession to the Protocol of 1988 relating to the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, 1974, recommending its approval without amendment, Senator Ligarda.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee Report number 249, prepared and submitted by the Committee on Foreign Relations on Peace Resolution number 653, resolution concurring in the acceptance of the agreement to promote compliance with international conservation and management measures by fishing vessels on the high seas, recommending its approval without amendment, Senator Ligarda.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
250, prepared and submitted by the Committee on Foreign Relations on Peace Resolution number 654, resolution concurring in the accession to the agreement on port state measures to prevent, deter, and eliminate illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, recommending its approval without amendment, Senator Ligarda.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Additional reference of business, message from the House of Representatives. Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 20 February 2018 it passed the following House bills in which it requests the concurrence of the Senate. House Bill number 7115, entitled An Act Penalizing the Conversion or Causing the Conversion of Irrigated and Irrigable Lands, amending for the purpose of Republic Act number 6657 as amended, otherwise known as the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law of 1988.
To the Committee on Agrarian Reform.
House number 652, an act creating an additional branch of the Regional Trial Court in Usami City, converting the Municipal Circuit Trial Court covering the municipalities of Clarin and Tudela into the Municipal Trial Court of Clarin, and creating a new Municipal Circuit Trial Court covering the municipalities of Sinakaban and Tudela, all in the 2nd Legislative District of the province of Misamis Occidental, and appropriating funds, therefore, amending for the purpose Batas Pambansa Bilang 129, otherwise known as the Judiciary Reorganization Act of 1980.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Finance.
Resolutions. Resolution number 655, resolution directing the Senate Committee on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies to conduct an inquiry on the status of the implementation of Republic Act number 10870, or the Philippine Credit Card Industry Regulation Act of 2016, for the purpose of establishing clear-cut guidelines on debt payments, punishing unscrupulous credit collection agencies, and protecting borrowers. Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committee on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies.
656, resolution honoring the late Napoleon Abueva, father of modern Philippine sculpture, for his unparalleled contribution to the development of Philippine arts. Senator Laila M. De Lima.
To the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, with the permission of the chamber, I move to transfer, no, I'm sorry, I move to resume consideration of PS Resolution 647 under the Committee Report 243. The resolution pertains to the ratification of the free trade between the EFTA states and the Philippines, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the said measure is under consideration.
Therefore, I move to resume. I move to consider PS Resolution 647. I'm sorry, my original motion should have been transferring it from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders, Mr. President. So I withdraw the first motion, Mr. President.
The said motion is withdrawn.
I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders, PS Resolution 647, under Committee Report 243, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
I move to consider PS Resolution 647 under Committee Report 243, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
May we ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure?
Secretary.
Resolution concurring in the ratification of the free trade agreement between the EFTA states and the Philippines.
To sponsor the measure, Mr. President, I move that we recognize the Chairman of the Committee on Foreign Relations, Senator Loren Legarda.
Okay, may I ask our colleagues to give our full attention to our Senator Legarda, who will sponsor the measure. Senator Legarda is now recognized.
Mr. President, esteemed colleagues, I wish to seek approval of the proposed Senate Resolution number 647 under Committee Report 243, entitled Resolution Concurring in the Ratification of the Agreement of the Free Trade Agreement between the EFTA states and the Philippines. It is my honor to present this important agreement with the Switzerland Confederation, the Kingdom of Norway, the Republic of Iceland, and the Principality of Liechtenstein, more collectively known as the European Free Trade Association, or EFTA, as this marks an important milestone in the overall international trade policy of the Philippines. This engagement is also of particular significance given that this is only the second bilateral free trade agreement of the Philippines, the Philippines-Japan Economic Partnership Agreement, or PJEPA, being the first. Compared to other countries, we are behind in actively engaging other trading partners through FTAs, even as the Philippines has much to gain. Before I proceed, allow me to provide a brief background on the rationale for engagement with EFTA. Entering into an FTA with EFTA is part of the country's strategy to gain a stronger foothold in the European market, which includes applying and maximizing the benefits arising from the preferences provided by the European Union Generalized System of Preferences Plus, negotiating a Philippine-EU FTA, concluding the Philippines EFTA FTA to have a wider reach in the region. Considering that EFTA requires the same standards as the EU, this will allow Philippine exporters to Europe to gain from economies of scale through improved market access in both EU and EFTA. Specifically, with respect to the EFTA, the Philippines aims to secure market access for Philippine agriculture exports beyond EFTA commitments in its existing FTAs. This will enable the Philippines to significantly improve the country's market share vis-a-vis the other ASEAN member states in the EFTA market. Noting the similarities between the products that the Philippines and other ASEAN neighbor countries export to EFTA, the Philippines can take the opportunity to position itself as EFTA's primary import source of these products. Second, attract investments in services and non-services sectors, particularly those which can benefit from additional capital and/or technology transfer. Example, in areas of fisheries, seafaring, maritime transport, energy, telecommunications, and financial services, to name a few. Or spur domestic competition with a view to make the Philippines as EFTA's hub in ASEAN. obtain market access for trade-in services, including opportunities for Filipino professionals and skilled workers, while providing enhanced levels of protection as well as service companies in the areas of personal services, air transport, construction, and related engineering services and tourism. Now that the agreement has been concluded, I share the sentiments of our trading partners in looking forward to the realization of the benefits arising from the FTA. The Philippines was able to secure duty-free market access for all industrial and fisheries tariff lines, as well as significant concessions on agricultural products, particularly those that are currently being exported to EFTA, and those with high potential export interest. Conversely, the Philippines provided EFTA zero tariffs on almost all industrial and fishery products, with transitional periods for select tariff lines. In essence, the commitments undertaken for trade in goods will enable Philippine businesses to participate in EFTA's value chains by providing intermediate goods and services. The negotiators also took care to exclude from tariff commitments tariff lines identified as highly sensitive products. The agreement also entails cooperating in terms of dealing with anti-competitive practices with a view of ending such practices or its adverse effects on fair trade. EFTA's commitments in the cross-border supply of services and movement of natural persons present opportunities to Philippine service suppliers, both skilled workers and professionals, particularly for architects and engineers, which are professions where a large number of Filipinos engage in. On the part of the Philippines, market access commitments were undertaken where additional investments and technical expertise are deemed beneficial to the country, such as renewable energy, IT/BPM, construction, maritime transport. Both the Philippines and EFTA also share the commitment to promote and facilitate the inward and outward flow of investments. Personally, I am pleased with the fact that the agreement promotes international trade while contributing to the objective of sustainable development, all the while ensuring that labor rights and environment protection will not be sacrificed in the name of trade and investments. The Philippine-EFTA FTA was negotiated only with the promotion of fair economic cooperation in mind, one that will enable a business environment conducive for investments and provide opportunities for producers, consumers, and service suppliers alike. The Philippine government ensured that all relevant stakeholders, exporters, producers, laborers, the academe, civil society were sufficiently consulted during the course of the negotiations. The Philippine panel entered the negotiating table armed with these inputs from stakeholders, recalibrating negotiating positions when needed to ensure that the Philippines arrive at a balanced outcome for all that will be affected by the FTA. Likewise, all negotiating positions crafted were consistent to and compliant with Philippines laws, rules, regulations. Opening markets through agreements such as this goes hand in hand with all the economic reforms and the ease of doing business initiatives of the government to project a clear message that the Philippines is more than ever ready and open for business. As the President himself mandated, more opportunities abound when we explore and maximize our relations with not only our traditional trading partners, but also our non-traditional and high-potential trading partners. I urge all of you, my esteemed colleagues, to see this agreement as one that will provide for more opportunities for our fellow Filipinos. Given all the merits, on behalf of your Committee on Foreign Relations, I propose for the Senate's approval of and concurrence in the Philippine-European Free Trade Association Free Trade Agreement as thus presented. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, to give time to our colleagues to study the proposed measure, I move to suspend consideration of PS Resolution 647 under Committee Report 243.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, the chair of the Committee on Foreign Relations, Senator Loren Legarda, will sponsor 7 resolutions, all pertaining to the ratification of treaties on maritime affairs. Similar to what we did previously, Senator Legarda will deliver an omnibus sponsorship on the measures. However, for purposes of the interpellation and its passage on second and third readings, we will be taking it up one at a time, Mr. President. So I so move that the procedure be approved by the body.
Any objection to the procedure outlined by the Majority Leader? Hearing none, the said procedure is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders the following bills. Senate Resolution 648, 649, 650, 651, 652, 653, and 654.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
May we ask the Secretary to read the title of the resolutions, Mr. President? The titles.
Yes, Secretary, please.
Resolution concurring in the accession to the International Convention of on the Control of Harmful Anti-Fouling Systems of Ships 2001. Resolution concurring the accession to the Protocol of 1997 to amend the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships 1973 as modified by the Protocol of 1978 relating thereto. Number.
PS Resolution number.
PS Resolution number 649. PS Resolution number 650. Resolution concurring in the accession to the Protocol of 1988 relating to the International Convention on Load Lines 1966. PS Resolution number 651. Resolution concurring in the accession to the Protocol of 1978 relating to the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea 1974. PS Resolution number 652. Resolution concurring in the accession to the Protocol of 1988 relating to the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea 1974. PS Resolution number 653. Resolution concurring in the acceptance of the agreement to promote compliance with international conservation and management measures by fishing vessels on the high seas. PS Resolution number 654, resolution concurring in the accession to the agreement on port state measures to prevent, deter, and eliminate illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing.
Majority Leader.
As agreed, Mr. President, to sponsor the measures, I move to recognize the Chair of the Committee on Foreign Relations, Senator Leonie Legarda.
Senator Legarda is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request the body's permission to deliver an omnibus sponsorship speech for all the maritime-related agreements and treaties, but this will be tackled in interpellations individually. May also request that the 28 pages, I will read only the highlights, Mr. President, but submit the full speech. It's so taxing on my voice to read 28 pages, so I will abbreviate on some portions. Thank you. I have the honor, Mr. President, to seek approval of 7 maritime-related treaties, namely Senate Resolution number 648 under Committee Report 244, International Convention on the Control of Harmful Anti-Fouling Systems on Ships 2001. Senate Resolution 649 under Committee Report 245 on the MARPOL Protocol. Senate Resolution 650 under Committee Report 246 on the International Convention on Load Lines 1966. Senate Resolution 651 under Committee Report 247 on the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea 1974. Senate Resolution 652 under Committee Report 248 on the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea 1974. Sandali. 1 minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session is suspended.
Sorry. Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, 1974. This is a protocol of 1988. Senate Resolution 653 under Committee Report 249 on the international conservation and management measures by fishing vessels on the high seas. Senate Resolution 654 under Committee Report 250 on the agreement on port-state measures to prevent, deter, eliminate illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. As citizens of an archipelagic nation, we are very much aware of the importance of our seas. While the seas separate different islands, they also connect us as one nation. And thus, even with the jurisdiction of local governments on certain parts of the sea, it takes a whole-of-society effort to ensure the sustainable management of our seas and the conservation of marine biodiversity and the safety of vessels plying our seas. So, I would like to focus now on the protocols of 1978 and 1988, which relate to the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, the SOLAS Convention, and the protocol relating to the load lines and of 1966, which are interrelated conventions that aim to address issue on safety of ships. In the maritime world, there is perhaps no other more important international treaty concerning the safety of ships than SOLAS Convention. The first version was adopted way back in 1914 in response to the Titanic disaster, which we all know because of the film, in 1912, which cost the lives of more than 1,500 people, and has undergone a number of revisions, and the latest version is the 1974 SOLAS. And over the years, the industry has learned that marine accidents not only produce negative consequences on people, but also is bad for business. The 1978 protocol relating to SOLAS Convention was adopted by the IMO to update the safety standards of crude carriers and product carriers by requiring the fitting of inert gas systems, as well as radars and steering gear mechanisms to enhance safety of navigation. 10 years after the Protocol of 1978 was passed, a new treaty, the Protocol of 1988, was adopted to introduce the Global Maritime Distress and Safety System. May I be allowed no longer to read what this is, but it is in my submission. The protocols of 1978 and 1988 add further to the long list of safety requirements on ship construction and equipment under SOLAS. It behooves flag states to ensure that ships under their flag comply with the safety requirements. The Load Lines Convention that was adopted in 1966 prescribes the minimum reserve buoyancy and the free board of ships to ensure their stability by preventing overloading. Again, I would no longer write or read into the record the convention prescription, but it is in my full submission. So we know the importance of the Load Lines Convention as a major pillar of maritime safety. It prevents the overloading of ships through the presence of visible load line marks. And the Philippines has adopted the provisions of the convention for implementation on both Philippine-registered international and domestic ships over 15 meters in length. Again, may I no longer go into the details of the certificates and the evidence and the negotiations, but it is in the record. So, as a major supplier of seafarers for the international shipping community, the Philippines places great importance on maritime regulations that promote the safety of the ship and its crew. So why should we accede to this convention? Because this will demonstrate our country's commitment in ensuring the safety of ships and preventing accidents that could lead to massive loss of lives and serious damage to the marine environment through oil spills. In relation to protecting the marine environment, the Protocol of 1997 to amend the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, as modified by the Protocol of 1978, is a main, or we call it the MARPOL, is a main international convention covering the prevention of pollution of the marine environment by ships from operational or accidental causes. This was adopted in 1997 entered into force in 2005. It includes regulations aimed at preventing and minimizing pollution from ships, accidental, and that from routine operations. I will no longer read the 6 technical annexes, but it is part of my records, Mr. President. The protocol requires that ships over 400 gross tonnage and all platforms and drilling rigs engaged in voyages to ports and waters where the MARPOL Convention applies have a valid air pollution prevention certificate confirming compliance with equipment and operational requirements. And so, again, I will no longer read the importance of Protocol 1997 to the MARPOL Convention, which is attuned to the SDGs and the Paris Agreement on climate change. It is contained in my whole speech. Another agreement I wish to sponsor aims to address the risks of the harmful compounds that threaten the sustainability of the marine environment and the safety of human health due to the contamination of marine species. This is the Anti-Fouling Systems on Ships, or AFS Convention. It was adopted in 2001, entered into force 2008, in response to the growing threats to the marine environment and human health from harmful anti-fouling systems. Again, if you would allow me no longer to read into record the salient features of the convention, but it is in my whole report. So our accession is so important. It will demonstrate the country's serious commitment and solidarity with the international maritime community in the daunting task of protecting the marine environment and the conservation of our biodiversity, a state obligation that is well enshrined in the UNCLOS, which is considered as a constitution of the seas. Now, the last 2 maritime-related agreements are the issues on illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing activities. One was signed in 2009, entered into force in 2016, reflects the successful culmination of global efforts to combat IUU fishing by setting harmonized minimum standards for measures to be taken at ports. And the Port State Measurements Agreement, or PSMA, is the first binding international agreement to specifically target IUU fishing. Its objective is to prevent, deter, and eliminate IUU fishing by preventing vessels engaged in IUU fishing from using ports and landing their catches. This agreement reduces the incentive of such vessels to continue to operate while also preventing fishery products derived from IUU fishing from reaching national and international markets. Finally, the agreement to promote compliance with international conservation and management measures by fishing vessels aims to ensure the conservation and sustainable use of marine living resources on the high seas by requiring states to exercise their flag state responsibilities over their fishing vessels, which are 24 or more meters in length, fishing on the high seas. Again, if you allow me, all the benefits of the agreement I will no longer read into the record, but the principal benefit will come from the availability of information regarding vessels authorized to fish on the high seas under the Food and Agriculture Organization. In fact, the FAO office in the Philippines is here in their global registry of fishing vessels, which will lead to an increased ability to identify those vessels fishing without permission. This agreement supports the international efforts to combat IUU fishing by requiring fishing vessels to keep records of fishing operations and to catch documentation. It can help in curbing the problem of IUU fishing, which usually extends from the high seas to the exclusive economic zone. So we can see, Mr. President, that as part of a community of nations living in one planet, we need to cooperate with the international community towards the responsible use of our marine resources, the safety of vessels plying our seas, the protection of our high seas. Our lives are naturally linked to the ocean and with the richness of its resources. Thus, we must make our oceans benefit us in a sustainable manner by protecting not only our people who journey along its vastness, but also the marine life underneath. As I explained the importance of these agreements and its benefits to our country, I seek your unequivocal support for the Senate's concurrence in the accession to these 7 conventions on maritime-related issues. Thank you, Mr. President. As I repeat, the whole speech and report will be submitted and to be reflected in the official records as my sponsorship speech. I just lack my voice today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend consideration of the measures to give time to the members to study all of them. So I move to suspend consideration of Senate Resolutions 648, 649, 650, 651, 652, 653, and 654.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1233 under Committee Report Number 8.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
This is the measure on the Coconut Farmers and Industry Development Act. The parliamentary status of the measure is that we're still in the period of individual amendments, considering that this is a substitute bill. So I move to continue the period of individual amendments, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
I move to recognize the sponsor of the measure, Senator Francis Pangilinan, and to introduce individual amendments, Senator Ralph Recto, Mr. President.
The sponsor, Senator Pangilinan, is recognized, and for purposes of introducing amendments, Senator Recto is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, would the sponsor of the measure agree to a few amendments?
We will yield to listen to and hear out the proposed amendments, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, on page 1, lines 5 to 6. After the word attain, replace the phrase a balanced, equitable, integrated, and sustainable growth and development of with the phrase increase farm productivity and income of coconut farmers through the rehabilitation and modernization of. Section 2 will now read
yes,
Yes.
please proceed.
Section 2 would now read as follows, Mr. President. Section 2, Declaration of Policy. It is hereby declared the policy of the state to consolidate the benefits due to coconut farmers, especially the poor and marginalized, under various statutes and to expedite the delivery thereof to attain increased farm productivity and income of coconut farmers through the rehabilitation and modernization of the coconut industry.
Is there a deletion of income?
No, there is a deletion of a balanced, equitable, integrated, and sustainable growth and development of.
Accepted. We accept.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Any objection from the floor? Hearing none, the amendment is approved.
On page 3, lines 14 to 21. Delete entire subparagraph H and I and re-letter the succeeding subparagraphs accordingly.
Yes. May we hear from the proponent as to the reason behind deleting letter H and
I.
Yes, for the
Yeah,
record.
as discussed with the proponent of this measure, Mr. President, earlier on, we are creating too many government agencies or too many committees or too many coordinating councils, not to mention bloating the bureaucracy, Mr. President. And therefore, the committee referred to here is the Trust Fund Committee. And I propose that the DOF and the Bureau of Treasury be the one to take care of the trust fund for coconut farmers.
Yes.
So why create a new body?
Yes, I understand that in place of the Trust Fund Committee,
Yes.
which is under the proposed measure mandated to administer or manage the investments of the fund, you wish the good senator would like to
Leave it to the DOF and the Bureau of Treasury, Mr. President.
in lieu of the committee, it would be the DOF.
And the Bureau of Treasury.
Yes, yes. We understand where the good senator is coming from in terms of a bloated bureaucracy, Mr. President. But in this case, however, the committee representation, for example, includes farmers' representatives. We believe that they have to have a greater role in the disposition, in the investments of the fund.
Mr. President, one point. These are interrelated H&I investments. There was a proposal made and accepted by the sponsor anyway in the previous Senate plenary by Senator Villar that all funds anyway will be invested in government securities. So there is no need for investment guidelines to begin with.
Well, we agree, Mr. President. However, the representation of the farmers in investing or
But there is no other investment. Everything will go already to government securities anyway. Maybe we can discuss that later on when we talk about the committee referred to in the measure with regard to doing the plan, the coconut industry plan itself.
Yes, Mr. President.
But not for the investment activities.
Yes, Mr. President. During the technical working groups, the Bureau of Treasury intimated that they will still need an investment plan for the investments in government securities to include, for example, how many years?
Mr. President, it is all written down in the bill. For example, there is a provision here already, the highest interest rate possible. And what would that mean, Mr. President? The longer tenor rate. So what is the longest tenor rate of a government security, Mr. President?
I'm sorry, could the good sponsor...
There is no need for investment managers anymore. We are talking about government securities. There are only a few types of government securities. They're based on tenor. Kung 30 days ba yan, 365, 1 year. And naturally, the longer the period, the higher the rate. Anyway, this is all tradable, Mr. President, and risk-free.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, precisely, Mr. President, after conferring with the Bureau of Treasury, they have actually expressed their desire. I
The
suppose...
reason why, when you conferred with the Bureau of Treasury, you were creating a committee then, and there was no provision in the committee report that all the resources now will be invested in a government security. That was an amendment made and accepted last week, Mr. President. So the arguments now for the Treasury Department, wala na eh, because everything will be invested in government security. So there is no need for a committee.
Yes, the BTR representative is here, and they are still of the opinion that they will still need investment guidelines, Mr. President.
But there is no investment guideline to begin with, Mr. President. Everything will be invested in a government security.
Spending plan. Yes, Mr. President, the Bureau of Treasury is telling us that there will still be a spending plan. And
Yes.
therefore the BTR will need
That will be, and this committee precisely is the DOF and the BTR. Let us assume for the sake of argument, what would a farmer know with regard to the timing of the securities and so on and so forth? Or what you call farmers' representatives, Mr. President.
Mr. President, we will concede that the farmer may not necessarily be an expert in this particular aspect of determining an investment plan. However, Mr. President, it is their fund. In the interest of transparency, they may or may not decide to listen to the experts. And I would assume a more responsible representative of the farmer would seek expert advice and inputs, but in the interest of transparency, Mr. President, and precisely to ensure that the farmers' representatives are present when these funds are invested, or at least are represented by their representatives in this committee, there would be a greater chance, at least, Mr. President, of the fund not being misspent.
Mr. President, there is no such thing anymore as far as investments to begin with, because everything will be invested in a government security. Tapos na tayo dun eh. That amendment was taken already last week.
That is correct, Mr. President, but
Okay.
again,
And
it is not, I think the aspect of transparency and participatory governance is also a consideration in terms of the nature of the committee.
Mr. President, there are other provisions here with regard to transparency. There is a report to Congress, there is a report to the President, so on and so forth. It will be in the General Appropriations Act that I will propose later. You know, the problem, Mr. President, we're creating too many bureaucratic organizations. You know what? Let me give you my definition of a committee, Mr. President. A group of the unwilling pick from the unfit to do the unnecessary. There is such a saying, Mr. President. Now, this committee, under your proposal, will be under what office?
Office of the President, di ba? Under the Office of the President, Mr.
How many agencies are under the Office of the President?
Admittedly, Mr. President, many.
How many?
We don't have the data now, Mr.
Well, I
President.
can share with you the data. We discussed this for a year last year, Mr. President. There are 44 attached agencies to the Office of the President. We're creating one more, 45. When will we stop, Mr. President? And then may coordinating body na naman to, may farmers representatives. So I'm not against farmers representatives. Huh? I'm just saying, let us not bloat the bureaucracy. Dito, if I agree to this, may admin cost din to. Magkano na lang ang pupunta sa magsasaka dito? What is the mandate of the Treasury Department? What is the mandate of the Department of Finance? Why are we changing it? Why are we creating another body whose mandate will be the same as the Department of Finance or the Treasury Department?
Mr. President, admittedly, the COCO levy is unique. We may not, we agree that the Bureau of Treasury manages.
Now, what is the difference of this proposal with what has gone along in the last 30 years, Mr. President, as far as the COCO levy is concerned? They also had, in the past, they could invest anywhere. They had farmers' representatives. They had businessmen representatives. And where did that lead us to?
Mr. President, but they did not have the painful lesson that we now
And
are
precisely my point. That's why we're changing it already. Parang wala tayong natutunan.
We beg to disagree, Mr. President.
As far as I'm concerned.
With respect.
Now, let's take a look at paragraph I, Mr. President. Investment guidelines. Is there any other investment guideline kailangan dito? Everything nga, government security na ang investment.
Can I
With the permission of the two
interject?
gentlemen, if they don't
Yes,
mind.
yes,
Okay,
willingly.
Senator
The
Villar, you can
chairperson
join
of
the
the
discussion.
I just want to make a manifestation that I overlooked this H&I provision on page 3. when we indicated that we want to have the COCO levy fund invested in government securities, we didn't want anymore a committee to decide where to invest it. That's why it's government securities. There's no thing to study about investing in government securities. And it's the safest investment that you can ever make over a certain amount of money. It's just that I have to ask for your indulgence that I've overlooked this provision na committee and investment guidelines, because I think there should not be any more committee and there should not be any more investment guidelines, because when you invest in government securities, it's the safest investment in this country. That's why we opted for government securities, so that there will be no more decision making with regards to investment.
That is correct, Mr. President.
And so I would like to agree with with Senator Recto that this is that there is no need for this H and I provision. We overlook this.
Sir.
We overlook this.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. I thank the distinguished lady for her interjection
Mr.
to
President.
our discussion, following the concept of her amendment last week, that everything now will be invested in government securities. And I maintain, similar to her position, that there is no need for a committee.
Okay, so can we...
Mr. President, my concern, Mr. President, is that if we leave it to the DOF and the BTR and exclude, farmers' representatives, Mr. President, I'm afraid that the farmers and stakeholders who have fought for this COCO levy measure all these years will feel that they are again being taken out of the equation, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
That is my concern, Mr.
we
President.
can discuss that point later on in another provision. Because there's another provision here. It creates so many bodies kasi, Mr. President. Later on, we can discuss that point pagdating sa spending. Pagdating mamaya dun sa another committee being created here with other farmers' organizations, other stakeholders, pagdating sa paggawa ng plano. If at all, that is the right place to discuss that issue. But not in this committee for the investment and investment guidelines, Mr. President.
With respect, Mr. President, I'm willing to perhaps limit the membership of the committee to perhaps, yes, the DOF, the BTR, and representatives of the farmers, Mr. President. I think I will have to, I will not be able to explain to the farmers and stakeholders who have been lobbying for this measure for many years, Mr. President, from the time of Senator Tañada when he was still here in the Senate, Congressman Oca Santos, Mr. President, who have championed the cause of the farmers, Mr. President. Perhaps the compromise would be to limit the number of members of the committee, but to exclude representatives from the farmers' organizations who paid for, actually, who owned the levy, Mr. President.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead. Senator Villar.
Mr. President, I just want to make a manifestation that when we decided that all the money should go to treasury bills, that is for the welfare of the farmers. It is the safest way by which we protect the coconut farmers, that nobody will decide for them where the money will go, but it will go to government securities, which is the safest investment in this country. And to make it up to them, they would say that the income, because it is government security, is low. We mandated in the bill that the government of the Philippines will give 5 billion a year to the Philippine Coconut Authority to cover for the whatever difference, because if you give 5 billion a year plus the 2%, 2 billion you earn from treasury bills, you're getting 7 billion a year from the government. For that money, And that is 7% return on investment, which you cannot get in any other investment, and still your money is safe with the government of the Philippines.
Yes.
So I
If-
think
yes.
it is the fairest deal ever that will be gotten by the coconut farmers in this country. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah, in
President.
addition, Mr. President, as I mentioned before and in our interpellations last year, nung araw, yung ginawa din ni Presidente Marcos, ganito din eh. May committee, may kunwari representatives to decide how to invest the money. Ganon din eh. What happened, Mr. President? Until today, 30 years na tayo, walang nangyari. Lumaki ngayong pondo, pero hindi na kinabang ang magsasaka. Now, where are we today? Do we follow the same? Ipapalitan lang natin yung mga tao? Now, the point is, as I mentioned already earlier as well, this is the best way, the fairest way of doing it. Maliwanag na eh, government security. So there's no decision to be made. There's no such thing as investment guidelines anymore to begin with. Ergo, there's no need for a new committee. Pangatlo, what is the role of the DOF and the Bureau of Treasury? Hindi pa pangalagaan ng pera ng taong bayan. In simple language. Ayun ang trabaho.
So, although we are still on page 3, is
Yes.
the good senator ultimately going to propose the deletion of section 12, which talks about, which is the creation of the committee? Is that,
That is
is that
correct.
where we're going?
We will
On page
get there at the
10A.
appropriate time.
So that we will know
Sunod-sunod
where we're
po,
going.
yes.
Okay.
And whenever there is a phrase committee, will be the DOF and the Bureau of Treasury.
It's a total change in concept. Yes.
Correct.
Precisely,
Now,
Mr. President.
we're not creating now another office or another agency.
So,
Use the mandate of existing offices.
Mr.
That's
President,
basically where we're coming from.
precisely why, Mr. President, may we have a minute suspension, Mr. President?
session suspended.
expand yung PCA.
We're ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, there has been a long debate on a particular proposed amendment by Senator Recto, and so the proponent and the sponsor have decided to discuss it further on Wednesday, and that will give them ample time to look at each other's proposal, Mr. President. So in the meantime, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1233.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
May we have the additional reference of business, Mr. President?
Any objection? Hearing none, approved. Secretary, please proceed with the additional reference of business.
Second additional reference of business. Resolution commending, resolution number 657, resolution commending and congratulating Donnie Nietes for defending his International Boxing Federation Super Flyweight title at the Superfly 2 event in Los Angeles, California on February 25, 2018. Senator Emmanuel Manny D. Pacquiao.
To the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move to consider PS Resolution 657.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Maybe ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure.
Secretary, please do so.
A resolution commending and congratulating Donnie Nietes for defending his International Boxing Federation Super Flyweight title at the Superfly 2 event in Los Angeles, California on February 25, 2018.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, sponsor Resolution 657, I move to recognize Senator Manny Pacquiao.
Senator Pacquiao is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, fellow senators and fellow Filipinos. 3 weeks ago, we celebrated the victory of Jerwin Ancajas, who won the International Boxing Federation Junior Bantamweight crown via 10th round technical knockout against Israel Gonzalez of Mexico on February 4, 2018 in Texas, USA. Today, we have another reason to celebrate. Donnie Ajas Nietes knocked out his Argentinian challenger Juan Carlos Rivico, and thus retaining the International Boxing Federation Super Flyweight title yesterday, February 25, 2018, in Los Angeles, California. Nietes showed his dominance by dictating the tempo of the match by using his 1-2 combination on the 7th round. Nietes gave succeeding body shots before ending the match with a solid left uppercut that brought Rivico to the canvas. This is the 41st win for Nietes with 23 knockouts. With this, I filed PS Resolution number 657, a resolution commending and congratulating Donnie Nietes for defending his International Boxing Federation Super Flyweight title at the Superfly 2 event in Los Angeles, California on February 25, 2018. With our all-out help and support, Mr. President, the time will come when we will celebrate more global victories from our excellent athletes. Aside from Jerwin Ancajas and Donnie Ajas Nietes, there will be more world-class Filipino boxers who will bring prestige and honor to our country. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Pacquiao. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move to adopt PS Resolution 657, subject to style.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Tuesday, February 27, 2018.
Any objection? There being none, session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Tuesday, February 27, 2018.